So to start off, I would like to do my traditional introduction. Uvanga atiga Anohuk. Anohuk is my Inupiaq name, and it means little girl. I am named after my Anna, Catherine Barr of Shishmrath. My parents are the late Delano and my mom, Minnie Barr of Shishmrath. I grew up in Kotzebue and in Nome, which are both cities in Alaska, at about 3,000, 4,000 people each. But I also have family from Noatak, which is a small community where my mom is from, which is about 550 people. And Shishmrath is actually a community on the coast that is about 700 people, almost 700 people. This first slide shows a little bit what I grew up with. This is an example of Inupiaq skin sewing that my grandmother had made. This is what we like to call fancy or kulik, which is fancy work. The fancy designs of muklaks or the bottom parts of parkas.
La parte inferior de parkas.
And so
Entonces,
I want to go ahead and make sure
quiero
that,
continuar.
No, excuse me, sorry for interrupting. Sorry for interrupting. It's Eduardo from interpretation team. Camila, you are not on interpreting. And please, Nigel, host, can you add Soraya as interpreter, please? In Soraya, English, Spanish interpretation. Sorry for interrupting. We are changing the interpreters. We just need to add in Soraya as interpreter, and then we can continue with the interpretation. Let me just check.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, we are ready now. We can continue. Sorry for interrupting.
Thank you. So because I live in Fairbanks, I would like to acknowledge that I'm working on the ancestral land of Trapieda, honoring the people of the Lower Tanana, which are the traditional Athabascan or Dana peoples. That I also acknowledge that these lands on which we do our work here or live are the unceded ancestral lands of the Dana people who stewarded these lands for thousands of years and continue to steward these lands. I thank you and respect your enduring relationship to your homelands, wherever you may be. And as I did a little bit of my introduction just earlier, my name is Amy Topkok. I mentioned the communities where I'm from. So you can see from this map that of Northwest Alaska that I grew up in Kotzebue and in Nome. I grew up pretty much in the 70s and 80s at home. And that's where I continue to say where I'm from, even though I've lived in Fairbanks since I was 18. One thing that made me realize more about who I was, what's my cultural identity, is that I was able to go to Norway as an exchange student my last year of high school. When that happened, I realized that, when I was growing up, I was just a girl. That's all I knew. I knew I was Inupiaq. I knew I was Native. I knew I was Alaska Native. But I didn't consider it valuable until I was completely removed from it. And being a 17-year-old way across the globe to a different land of people that I didn't understand, but also have a completely different language, made me realize I need to know who I am, because there will always be people asking me, who are you? Where do you come from? And what's it like being you? So there's the photo on the left. That's a photo of me when I was 7 years old with one of my cousins. And that's a photo in Shishmaref. And so I grew up with a lot of family. So this was just the beginning of me understanding who I was. A little bit about Alaska. Alaska is really large. I think a lot of people know that. But for those that don't know Alaska, here's a map of the different environments that we have. But although this map does not show the cities and the villages that we now have, you can see the many different environments that we live in. And where I live currently is right about in the middle of the interior in the city Fairbanks, Alaska, which is about 33,000 people. Where I'm from is from the Seward Peninsula that's located right there. That's in Northwest Alaska. So in Kotzebue, which is in the Kotzebue Sound, it has approximately 11 rural communities that's surrounding it. And as you can tell, it is very much in the north. We have 9 months of winter easily, but that has been changing due to climate change. And then from this map, you can see that this is also representing approximately the 23 different Alaska Native peoples in Alaska, the indigenous population. So I'm from the Inupiaq region, which is the far north and northwest Alaska, but I live here where the red colors are, that it's in the Upper Tanana section, which is representing what's commonly known as Athabascan, but also the Dana people, who are actually related to many other peoples in Canada. You can see from the smaller map inset, and then also with the Navajo people and a few other groups in Northern California and Oregon. So there's many different kinds of people that live here that actually, when people are asking who lives you, are you Eskimo? We don't like using the word Eskimo. That is a name that is put upon us by the colonizers. We like to refer to us as being Inupiaq. And so a lot of people will correct people when they visit to Alaska. Are you Eskimo? Or what kind of Alaska Native are you? And so from just looking at us, we look like a lot of other indigenous groups from across the world, but we very much identify with our culture. Okay, I'm trying to. So over the years, since we've had a great impact, as Jesse had explained, of being colonized, we've had to define our values. We had to define ourselves. So what came out of this is that there is a list of Alaska Native values that we share within our schools, but we share in our different regions. And so this is a list of some of the values that we try to adhere to. We try to show respect to others because each person has a special gift, but also really showing that we may need each other in the future. So by showing respect to others, we can also hopefully receive respect back. We also need to share what you have. Giving makes you richer, because what we realized again is that you need to be able to share what you have, because it actually will help the community be able to survive. And again, knowing who you are a reflection on your family, and by extension, your people. We want to be able to do honorable things for our family. We also need to accept what life brings. And what that means, especially today, you cannot control many things, but there are things that you can do to help make your life better. Another value is having patience, being able to ground yourself by having that patience, that we realize that some things cannot be rushed. We also need to live carefully. What you do will come back to you, which means that we want to be able to have a good life. And that means being doing things in reflection with the future. We also need to take care of others. You cannot live without them. Again, about the idea of having that survival technique. But it's also just being able to realize we are within a group, that we need to take care of each other. Honor your elders. For those that are very lucky to be able to have your elders still with you, they show you the way in life. And I truly believe this. Pray for guidance, as we've seen that many people are asking for guidance on what do we do today on many different such situations. Even though many things are not known, that being able to pray for guidance is so valuable, because sometimes things will come to us when we least expect it. See the connections, that all things are related. And I have definitely witnessed this during this conference. We have different things that we can see across the globe, that we're related, that we are seeing the same effects affecting us in many different areas. A little bit about the photo that I put on this slide is that it's of my great aunt Fanny Barr, or Good Hope, who's a sister of my grandfather, Gideon Barr, which is my dad's dad, of Shishmrath. And that is a photo of her processing and harvesting the reindeer, because my family has owned a reindeer herd for the longest time on the Seward Peninsula. This photo is an estimate of 1970s. This is also representing a photo of how I started my research. I am a current PhD student at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. I achieved my master's degree in in cross-cultural studies in 2018. And I've been able to write about my family related to skin sewing. And what I found, that it's part of a larger picture. It actually enabled us to help to be able to survive times, as Jesse had mentioned, of that time of greatest impact to our way of life. For those that don't know about the history of skin sewing, I look at it that it was a way, it was a skill that was needed to be able to survive in the Arctic. Here we have the only photo that I could find of a young girl who already was taught how to skin sew, that she's crimping the bottoms, the hard bottoms of kamuk. And kamuk is actually the boots. So just being able to have those boots ready and new again every year, it would mean that we constantly have to work with what we have. We were already seeing fabric and different materials come up to Alaska in the late 1800s and well into the 1900s. And so I just wanted to share that this photo came from 1952. So even as a black and white photo, you can see the impact of how we've embraced new material. I do want to check the chat really quick, just because even though I'm presenting, I want to make sure that I can capture anything. And Jesse, if you can, from time to time, let me know if there's anything that I should pay attention to.
Yeah, we can open it up for questions after, Amy. People are just commenting and loving your presentation.
Oh, good. Thank you. And I do want to, yes, I have the beautiful, I'm actually in the city. We just have a lot of trees in the city, which we've been very lucky for. Okay, I will continue. So again, with this photo, because I knew how we used to crimp our mukluks, which was that you can tell who was an experienced skin sewer in the family. It was the women with the shortest teeth, because they would often have to make new mukluks every year because they would get worn out. And we needed them because, like I mentioned, there's 9 months of winter usually, or sometimes longer if it was a really cold year, long time ago. Okay. Go back to see. So what I really needed to do, because I didn't see this while growing up, I didn't see a lot of information given to me as a young girl about Inupiaq skin sewing. I just only experienced it with my mother being a skin sewer, often making sealskin mukluks or sealskin slippers or dolls or mittens, because we used them, but also for sale to other people. Here's a photo of the reindeer herding families. Like I mentioned, once I started to look for information, I found these rich and inspiring photos of people, my people. And it enabled me to understand what kinds of things we were capable of even long ago. So with the introduction of reindeer herding that came to Alaska in the 1880s, by the 1920s, my grandmother, one of my grandmothers, Catherine, the one that had sewn that example that I showed to you earlier, she was born in 1916. This is the life that she grew up in, being in a reindeer herding family. She grew up with these designs. Being able to create designs had a function in our way of life. From afar, you can tell whose family you are part of by looking at the designs. From a standpoint of being able to create new designs, you also get recognized for your quality of work, that you are a wealthy family not in monetary sense, like money, but you are wealthy in the sense that you had enough food for the rest of the year, and the women in the family were able to focus on, what can I make my husband? What can I make my hunter in the family? May it be a son or someone else that they value, they needed, so that they can wear fine clothing when they went to the reindeer trading fairs that happen once a year. I do want to note the black and white large pieces of skins that are used in this these parkies here are also made of calf skin. If it's not made from the reindeer, you can see the reindeer has a very thick fur. It's not really an appropriate skin to use because it's brittle. The hair itself is brittle. So what they're actually wearing is an introduced skin from the lower 48 or the lower 48 states. Because what was happening in the 1800s in lower 48 is that there were cowboys and Indians, right? So cowboys, or the westward expansion, where people were starting to colonize westward into California from the east. And when they did that, they needed cattle. They needed to set up ranches or farms where they started having more livestock. So these skins that were brought to Alaska were actually introduced calf skins. So being out of cowhide or calves, because they were already processing them in the lower 48. That's what that coloring is. And even today, it is a valued skin because it's easier to sew with. And it could be a large skin. But you can see some of the different patterns that you can have. I do want to note in the middle of the person that is wearing a darker fur, that is a traditional caribou hide skin fur. And so that is why it's all dark. And then you'll notice on the sides of the hood that there are two, looks like spikes, but those represent the walrus tusks. And what it was, as a hunter and as a family, if you're on the ice and you're around walrus cannot see very well. So if they saw somebody or something big moving on the ice, in order to not scare them, they would see the tusks and then they would think it was another walrus. So they wouldn't be as scared. But it's also a design that honors the walrus, because the walrus is so important to our way of life in the ocean. It provides food. It provides the skins that we need, because there's different parts of the walrus we use for many everyday items. But also it provided ivory. That's what those are, is the ivory pieces that we use in a lot of tools and often now in jewelry today. So I will go. So this next slide is about being able to see what kind of celebrations that we held a long time ago. I'm going to take you with a few more slides about the history, but I will get to my family in later. So this is an example of Inupiaq men who are dancing in the spring. There were celebrations for all kinds of things, but also just celebrating that we now have more light. We get to meet with each other. We can start the spring hunts for seals and walrus. We can go berry picking later in the summer. We get to gather the food that we need every year. But from this, you can see this is a photo from about 1916, or not, excuse me, 1915, as a festival outside, with them not having to wear a fancy parka or a parka. It's already warm out and there's no snow or very little snow on the ground. But you can see the designs of different muklaks, how they started to emerge as being able to be fancy. Whereas other muklaks, you can see with the man on the left, has more common muklaks, because not everybody could afford fancy muklaks. I wanted to be able to look at that in my people's history. But you can see also by 1915, a lot of European made clothing had made it up to Alaska, and it was much more common to wear. And you can see that by the hats that they wore and by the often leather shoes and different pants and dresses that they wore. So we were already getting goods and adopting those goods in Alaska, at least by 1900. I also want to bring up the sense that we can look to ourselves as having that knowledge about different things in our culture that we can share with others. Just want to make sure. I want to be able to share this photo because this is my grandmother in the middle as a 7, 8-year-old, maybe 9 years old. I'm not quite sure, but it is a black and white photo that is shared in my family from her parents as being reindeer herding parents. This is where I feel so humbled to be able to look towards my family and see what kinds of fancy designs that they were able to afford, but also finding that pride in their cultural identity to be able to go, yes, this is what we do because this is also the proper thing we do when we know that we have enough in our family. So you can see the designs that were on my great-grandfather's parka, fancy parka. And then my great-grandmother, who's standing, she has an older style fancy parka with the U-shaped form. And that's very common to see that also all across Canada and different, few other different groups in Alaska. So I'm very much in awe of who my family was because I've been very, very lucky to be able to find photos like this, to understand my own culture and my own identity. And then this is actually who I saw growing up. That is my grandmother on the far right, sitting with 2 of her siblings. The one in the middle is my great uncle Delbert Enningwalk of Shishmaref. He's actually the youngest of the 11 children that my grandmother grew up in. Then that my great aunt that's sitting on the left side of my Uncle Del is Flora Wiwana. Again, another person that I so admired because I actually grew up visiting them, seeing the types of things that they do, and then the stories that they were able to share with me about how they grew up. And so I really think that if people have that sense of belonging, it's also understanding, like I mentioned before, knowing who your elders are, talk with them, be with them, ask questions, but be careful on how you ask questions because we do not want them to suffer thinking about instances that they may have suffered before with colonization. And then when I looked at more photos, I've reached out to extended family, my dad's cousins, because once I started to be curious about my own family, it was already too late to ask direct people about different things in my family, about what was it like wearing these parkas? How did you make them? How can I make one? And so the photo here is actually of my great aunt that's sitting on the left. In this, my great aunt is Bessie Barr, who is my grandpa Gideon Barr's sister, which is my dad's dad. And so this is when she was younger in Kotzebue in the 1970s, late 1970s, because I think that's when color photography was also starting to be more used. And then that is her mother sitting in the middle, Emily Payurzak Barr. And then there's Fanny Goodhope, the one that we saw earlier in that photo of standing and doing the reindeer harvest. That's her sitting on the right. Again, I'm in awe about what's it mean to have a fancy parka? What pride did we have? What did it take to make one of these? I had so many questions. And then I got to understand by my mom and my about to make one parka, it takes more than just one woman. To make one parka, it took sisters, and besides the mother helping a daughter or a grandmother helping a granddaughter, it may take several women to work on one parka because it will take more than several seasons to collect enough furs. But then it's designing the parka so it has the proper designs to be able to show other people who you are. Every one of those designs have meaning. Now, some of those meanings have been lost, especially from my area. But I do know that the tassels are wolverine skins. They're tassels of wolverine because that showcase that the hunter was skilled in that family to be able to hunt the wolverine. The wolverine is the fiercest animal in our forest, in our country. So even just to be able to hunt and successfully hunt the wolverine meant that hunter had a good relationship with nature to be able to be gifted that wolverine. So that was also a sign of wealth. And then I do want to point out the ruffs, the hood, the ruffs around the face. That is actually called a sunshine ruff. It is commonly now known as sunshine ruff. The wolverine fur is the dark part in the inner part of the face, the closest to the face, because an aspect of wolverine fur is that it does not hold any frost. That means it can be closer to the face when we breathe out in the extreme cold, that we won't have a lot of frost around our face. Then the longer hairs is made from wolf, which again is another revered animal. Being able to hunt the wolf is a very special thing. And the black and white geometric designs are again from the calf skin that I mentioned as the introduced skin. It became popular, and it is still today, to use calf skin to create these designs. And then here's a photo of my grandmother. Again, much older. This is a photo that is from about early 1980s. And then I've actually inherited this parka, this fancy parka. Being able to hold on to something that I know that my grandmother worked on is very special to me. It also means that I have the ability, now that I've become awoken to my culture, that I want to recreate this parka for myself, to continue the traditions of being able to sew like my grandmother and my mother, and now my youngest sister, who is now the skin sewer of the family. So I did put a couple notes in the slide. Researching our family, if done carefully, can be done so that we can add our knowledge to institutions that need our perspectives about our own ways of life. We also need to be able to conduct that research. We can become the researchers so that we can properly observe the protocols in working with our families, our elders, but our own Indigenous people. We need to add more information like this because so many people are curious and want to know more about it. But often, like some sources, they may have incorrect errors in those sources. And we need to be able to find out from our own research, what's it mean to be in this way of life? For my master's research, I did use all means possible. I did put down that I use social media. I've been lucky that I've used Facebook. I've connected with people and family that I wouldn't have normally connected with unless I traveled back home more constantly while attending university classes, which would have been very, very expensive in Alaska. I was able to to conduct phone calls with my mom and my dad, being able to talk about things. And again, I would mail them the questions or the ideas I would like to talk about. So I used a lot of mailed material to my parents so that they can have something to look at in front of them while being on the phone. I unfortunately thought about my master's research, even though I graduated in '97 with my bachelor's. I didn't start my master's research until 2013, which was about 5 years after my grandmother passed away. So I had to rely on accounts that were from my mom and my dad, which is totally fine. But I am so glad that I was able to find out information about my family and about my people to be able to share, because there isn't enough information when I did my review of current literature. And then I also did extended family. As I mentioned, my great aunt, Fanny Goodhope, again, that's the photo. It's a little bit bigger so you can see. One of the things I learned about that photo is, even though I was going, wow, it's such a beautiful parka, but why is she wearing it during a harvest when it's messy work? Then I found out it's because the parka was the warmest parka that she owned. And it was proper. It was okay for her to use it. She was also being very careful because the work is hard, but she had men, her husband, to do the hard lifting. She just helped process them more properly. And then the photo on my left, on the left side of the slide, is my other grandmother from Noatak, Victoria Onolik. Even though I could not find any photos of her in a fancy parka, she had her own fancy work that she was able to incorporate, and did all kinds of sewing and all kinds of knitting and crocheting. She was constantly creating something for family. She also made several fur parkas for my grandfather, her husband. But you can see from the photo that she was also being creative with fancy trim. That is trim that she made up. She was able to use what was available, sold in stores, and then she wanted to make her parka distinctive, her fabric covered parka, which is now more common today. And then a little bit of an idea of how extensive my research was. I went through my family and I wanted to find out who were the skin sewers in my family. And so I made up this family tree, noting who were the skin sewers and how extensive it was for my grandmother, Catherine Barr, to be one of 11 children. My mom was also one of 11 children, Minnie Barr, who is in this section here with my dad, Delano. Then when I looked to my other grandmother, Victoria Onolik, I believe that she was also one of 11 children. When I hear these numbers, it just meant that one of the benefits of becoming colonized is that we also had vaccinations against the very diseases that were introduced to us. So when I look at my grandmothers and knowing how many children they ended up having, that meant that the survival rate of those children were higher because of being vaccinated. Unfortunately, it does not address the idea that we were colonized in the first place. We didn't have to worry so much about new diseases, but we did have to worry about famine, not having enough food, and other things that can happen in the Arctic. There were several other women that I talk about in my research. And so those in bold are the skin sewers that I was able to find out and find some information. I do want to note that I mentioned my youngest sister. I am one of 6 siblings, 6 children. And so my youngest sister incidentally became the skin sewer of the family because she picked up the needle at a young age. My mother tried to teach me how to skin sew when I was about 12, 13. And so the process is a mother will assess her daughter on how adept they are on following directions, and if they're willing to learn about something new, but also if they are persistent in finishing a project. When my youngest, I already, unfortunately, with my mind being I'm a girl, but I do well in school, I was already knowing that I was going to college since 5th grade, because it was already encouraged that we need to have an education, because my parents didn't want any of us to experience how bad we were made to feel about ourselves. So getting an education would help us better in life. So, but I do want to mention again, like I said, my youngest sister is the skin sewer of the family. So this is a photo of Shishmarath, and that is in the springtime. You can see how important it is to be able to have seals. Seal skin is another skin that we greatly use. And in the photo, the fish, or excuse me, the seal skin racks, the seal racks are in the middle part, and the tent that's pitched up there along the coast. You can see it's full of seal meat, because in the springtime, usually in May and June, we have to be able to get our ugruk or bearded seals for our food for the rest of the year. But also we harvest the skins to be able to make into different garments. And so here's a few of the resources that I was able to use. I was able to use Secrets of Eskimo Skin Sewing that was written by Edna Wilder. That's the book, the small book off to the right. And the other book that I found very helpful was actually written by the National Park Service, which is a US government agency. They had found on the site of Ubla Sound and was able to excavate where my grandpa had, Grandpa Gideon Barr had grew up, was able to excavate the small site where several sod houses were located outside of Shishbra. And so they were able to do their best to record stories, especially visually, and then audio by video stories of my grandpa talking about how he remembered different things about that site, which I found very, very helpful. And then when I looked for more information, again, I was very humbly, not surprised, but very humbled to find more photos. And this is a photo that actually was used for the Wien Airlines, and being able to have that as a advertisement for people to visit Alaska. So please let me know, Jesse, if how much time do I have?
You can keep going, Amy, for about 5 more minutes or so, and then we can open it up for questions.
Okay, then I'll just go through these a little bit more. I do want to note the traditional way of hand measurements is in that photo. In that photo of what a proper sizing of those designs were. And then I wanted to show the back of the hood, which again has so much rich information of how to be done properly. And then here's a photo. I'll just go through these a little bit more quickly. This is a photo of my dad's mucklucks. Of course, they are worn. You can see the bottoms, but they are all white. Those are called reindeer legging mucklucks. To find reindeers that is completely white is very hard. So my grandmother made my dad that pair of mucklucks because she wanted to honor him and being able to have those designs on his mucklucks. And then I just wanted to share, this is my sister. She has worked hard to be able to continue the skin sewing traditions. And this is her work. That's actually a pair of mucklucks that she made for me, so I can wear them in my Inupiaq dancing. And then there is a pair of mucklucks that my husband was gifted by my mom, who she made him when we started our dance group. And that's a photo of us dancing. And that's our oldest son in the middle. And our youngest son is in the back. And that's my husband on the left side. And then this is how we're still continuing to use our skin sewing through special events, festivals, and actually the photo on the left bottom is a recovered ceremony that we welcome back the sun on December 21st. And we've been able to sing the sun back in at about 11, 12 a.m. because we get so little light in the winter until it becomes solstice, winter solstice again. And then I just want to end with this. This is a photo of our dance group. And we try to share how to make our own regalia. And you see the red, it's actually called an atikluk. So that is what I enjoy making and sharing with our dance members.